and welcome back to the Masters of Modern MMcast podcast. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben, no longer the boss, just the modern boss, Bateman.
Still the boss, man. You don't have to dilute my name that hard, but yes, happy to be here. Obviously back from Philly now for a couple of weeks and talking
going back. as like the day this episode releases, I believe we are both flying back to Philly.
Yeah, I mean it's so funny and so strange that like the concept of travel, like cross country travel, when I was growing up, and I imagine this is probably the case for you too, on some level, is like it seemed like a whole thing, like an endeavor to go across the country. It was like I had to pack and think about the weather. Because we do it so often now, I legit don't even think about the weather. I don't pack like it's different than any other trip. I
have a suitcase. I have a pea coat that, like, with a hoodie can basically survive most above 0 degree weather. Really, like, I might have to buy gloves wherever I'm at, and then it's the same, like 6 polos, 2 button downs, underwear, and like 3 pairs of jeans. Yeah. In fact, when I went to Philly, I messed up. I actually didn't pack, which we should get into the episode really quick. At least tell people what the episode is about. So today we are going to be your top 15, counting down the top 15 cards in NDG1. Phyrexia all will be one. You know, we're trying something new. We haven't had it done in set review actually for the last 2 sets, but realize that for one, we've now been a few weeks into it. It's out in Modern, it's out in Pioneer. We can kind of talk about its effect on those formats. It's specifically for Pioneer. It's specifically for Modern, with a little bit maybe of Pioneer coming up a little bit in here or there, and not Commander, none of that stuff. So specifically Modern top 15, counting down. Me and Ben have picked out the 15 cards, and I'm going to count down to my own opinion, and then Ben can judge me based on how I'm ranking them, along with all of you.
You get to make the list, and I just have to respond, guys. Alex
has
you podcast. He's taken over. He's driving the bus. I'm not happy as a passenger.
You helped pick out the cards, and you're along for this exciting ride along with our audience. So you won't be surprised about what cards are here, but you might be surprised about the order I decide to arbitrarily place them. Before we get started, I do want to shout out our sponsors, Alter Sleeves. Go to altersleeves.com and use the MMcast code. You will get a discount, and they will love us a little bit more every time. And both me and Ben are actually abandoned orphans that need more love, like Disney main characters. So please check out them. That also works for TCG Player. If you go to TCG, if you click on the link below, there's a TCG Player affiliate link, and that also has them start sending us just boxes of puppies that we get to just hang out with every time someone does it. So if you can do that for us as well, that's great. And then, as always, our wonderful patrons, the adopted parents we've always wanted, that we earn at the end of this movie. And if you can join them, the movie ending won't be sad. It'll be not a Pixar movie. It'll be a DreamWorks movie. You can make this a dream. There'll be a dance number. All-Star will be there, or Smash Mouth will be there.
Oh, it's on Shrek. Okay, I get you. I prefer Pixar endings. They're melancholy. They're more my speed. But if we want to be, nice and nice,
I like the upbeat endings of like a Kung Fu Panda or a How to Train Your Dragon. Where like there was sadness, but not sadness that destroyed your soul.
I have to date still never seen a How to Train Your Dragon movie, which I think is one of the big major misses of my life, because I think this movie,
the first one is wonderful.
It's great.
The second and third one is fine, but the first one is wonderful.
Here, yeah.
Also, the Kung Fu, both of those trilogies are both very good, and I think actually the Kung Fu Panda one is like underrated as a top tier animated film trilogy. Like, and then How to Train Your Dragon, at least the first one, is underrated as a top tier animated movie. Period.
Got my guy Jerry B. People love those movies, but we are not here to talk about Pixar and DreamWorks. We are here to talk about Magic. So let's get into it.
All right. So for those who don't know, Magic the Gathering, all will be one. Phyrexia is here. The design of the set was actually Wizards wanted to kind of like, historically, Phyrexian has been this war invading force. What does Phyrexia look like when it's attacking? And they want to be like, what does just Phyrexia look like when it's vibing? What does vibing Phyrexia look like? And so that's the set we got. So each of the different factions has their own vibes and styles. A lot of really powerful cards. Also, historically, cards sets that are set on Mirrodin are historically overpowered. I do think this has been, and time will tell, but I think this set is on the less powerful end of that scale. now a lot more sets have come out, but I'm not seeing any Mox Opals so far. I'm not seeing actually not a single Mox. This is, I think, the first time we've been to Mirrodin where there wasn't a Mox, because Mox, the imprint Mox was from the first one, right? Mox
Oh yeah,
Diamond.
Chrome Mox
Um,
is from Mirrodin, and then you have
yeah,
Mox Opal
Chrome Mox.
from Stars of Mirrodin, and then we didn't get one this time.
So interesting. Part of that is because they've learned that like colorlessness is a problem when you make color artifacts. They end up being a lot easier to balance or specifically scale, but they get to keep their artifactness. So, but there's a lot of powerful stuff, and we're going to be counting them down. And I think we're going to start first with the least powerful, number 15, barely made the list. In fact, we almost deleted it, and that is the Eternal Wanderer, 4 white legendary planeswalker, no type. Because that's the Wanderer's vibe. No more than one creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. +1 exile up to one target artifact or creature, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the player's next end step. 0, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with double strike, and -4 for each player. Choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices all creatures they control, not chosen this way. So obviously this is, being talked to, like, one of the things that has ruined the limited format is of what I've heard. It is a extremely powerful planeswalker. It protects itself very, very well. It acts as a 6-mana board wipe, cool control finisher, but definitely feels like it's missing the mark for modern. But yeah.
We have seen now the development of planeswalkers since the inception of these things in 2007, 2008, which is now that basically, like, once you get to 6 mana, you can make a planeswalker busted. Like, you don't have to worry about the thing being balanced. You don't have to really worry about it being like fair. Like, you can make it anything from like an 8 to a 10 in terms of the all-time scale pretty easily without blinking. And that's what this card is, right? It's a very, very, very powerful card. If you set it up in a way that you're controlling and you have like a blocker that you can block with to protect it, you basically can no longer win the game. Like, and this is from a limited perspective, you're correct. It's a horrific card to play against, but like, because of the exile ability, returning the creature at end step, not upkeep, even if the creature had haste, that thing you exile can no longer attack. So like, it doesn't matter what you are able to get down. It doesn't matter how you can interact. Basically, this card's a sweeper. 2/2 double strike is like a really good thing to be left with if you can sweep the board. Like, if you can protect this thing, you can start making those every turn. They're very good. They block very well. They end the game very quickly. This isn't good enough for modern, definitely. There are better cards in modern that would fill this slot, but just in terms of like, when we talk about 6-mana planeswalkers going forward, this feels like it's kind of in line with what we see nowadays.
Yeah, I think if Elsbeth, 6-mana Elsbeth, didn't exist, this card could maybe be talked about, because it does a lot of things that card does, but like slightly worse. It protects itself better, and the board wipe in some way can be stronger, because it kills everything but the creature you choose. Your opponent has a token, that's all they have, and you have a creature that probably can block it. So I do think in some ways it's a better. It like competes for that spot, and decks have definitely had that as a sideboard card finisher often. And that's really, to me, the spot that I could see the seeing play in modern is if you were thinking of playing the other Elsbeth, which is rare but does happen in a sideboard slot, Eternal Wanderer may come in. All right, next card, counting down. This is a classic. This is a reprint. This is one of the biggest story moments in the entire set. We're showing Jace being infected at the moment that Vraska was fully completed, and that is Phyrexian Arena. 1 black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. How the mighty have fallen. I mean, it's still in the top 15 possibly, but this if this was printed 6 years ago, we'd be talking about this as a slam dunk modern card. And now I think it's almost not playable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can compare this. There are riffs on this card that have come out over the years. Underworld Connections comes to mind, just like maybe 10 years ago.
Dark Confidant.
But specifically the ones that you lose a life and you draw a card. There have been a few different iterations of that effect that are like specifically designed to be worse than this card. This was originally printed, for those that don't remember, I believe in Apocalypse. I think this came out in like 2000, probably 2001, right around that time. 23 years ago. It was a card that we would all play in like, commander decks. You'd play this in like singleton decks. Like, this was a card that was obviously incredibly good back in its standard day. And Magic design in an odd sort of way took a very long time to catch up. That's part of it. That's probably the thing about this printing that I find the most, I guess, strange. Like the fact that this is at rare, not mythic rare, is a pretty good signifier of how special they want this to feel when you open it. It's
Yeah.
okay if this feels just like a good card. And I think the old concept of cast 3-drop that does nothing, that's hard to interact with, win game because you draw 5 more cards than your opponent over the next 5 turns, isn't good enough anymore for competitive high power formats. Like this is not going to see play in modern. It might see play like as a 2
I
of
think
in very particular control decks, but like it's
I
not
don't
a
think
4 of.
no play, because I do think there's opportunity both like in an Enchantress style deck that's trying to be Abzan, or a mono black devotion style deck that like wants something that's just going to stick in the field and draw cards for them. But I do think it's just like it's not quite there in a way that the format needs for it to be in any way considered a regularly played card. All right, next card on the list. A rift on a classic experience, but better, strict upgrade. Has seen the old version, has seen modern play before, and this could see modern play in the future. Gleeful Demolition. Red for a sorcery, destroy target artifact. If you control that artifact, create 3/1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. This is a play on the original card Kadotha Rebirth, which was one of the like first artifact sacrifice token cards that really in standard it saw play, and then it saw play all the way into modern, where basically instead of destroy target artifact, it was sacrifice an artifact and create 3/1/1 red goblin tokens. So this is a strict upgrade in the sense that it can be used as a removal spell. You can target another artifact. It also can target an indestructible artifact, which allows you to like target a Darksteel Citadel and keep the Darksteel Citadel while also making 3/1/1s. But it very easily can, for 1 mana, make a 3/1/1 tokens in play on turn 1 without working too hard, which is pretty significant.
The one reason this is not a strict upgrade is that you can obviously target your opponent's target in response and fizzle the spell. That's the Kadotha Rebirth part of this that is worse. It's not worse. It's just that it's not a strict upgrade because the sacrificing an artifact, I believe, is part of the cost of Rebirth, which is how you could do it and go ham. And like the fact that
Yeah,
you
but
can,
I would
yeah, no,
fine, strict upgrade. That is niche versus like I can now target your salvaging station and kill it.
if you ask me which is better, it's a 90-10. Like this card is much better
Well,
than Rebirth, but it would just in terms of, because that phrase of strictly better, I think sometimes like a newer listener might be like, exactly what does that mean? And there are some instances where that actually is 100% the
right,
case.
it's a 1 red 2/1 versus a 1
Yeah.
red 2/1 with first strike. The first strike one is strictly better.
Because the design team who's making this card is looking at it and thinking, is this strictly better? No, it has this one different play pattern. Okay, well then I guess it's not the same card. We can comfortably make this and it doesn't feel like we're just repeating ourselves with a different name. Like that's the only thing. But I agree with you. This card is definitely better. I mean, like
I think when they made this, they were like, we're making a better Kadotha. One thing that's more important though is that you can play both, right? I think that like a deck that is trying to do either of them, this one is maybe less true. Like if you're playing a deck that can splash red in a Hammer Time style deck, or even I've seen some what's the enchantment that gives +2/+2 to all artifacts?
Steel Sabbath. No, it's the one from the original Mirrodin block.
Yeah, one white +2/+2 to all artifact creatures.
It was
It's
the
on
one
the
that was
screen
banned.
right now. I said the words on the screen. But I've seen lists going around now with other cards that are on this list, and new cards from this one kind of moving towards that versus Hammer as like kind of more of a classic affinity. And if you're playing red, I could see you just playing one of these anyways, just for the value, or playing this as a card just for the value. But I also could see someone building a deck directly with the idea of I'm going to be Gleeful Demolitioning or Kadotha Rebirthing, and that is my game plan, my game A plan. So I do think, we've always talked like when a card effect that has been powerful in the past, but always just like didn't have the redundancy needed to make it all the way across the finish line. Once you add that redundancy, revisiting it is normally a good idea.
Yes, I mean if you're ever looking for ways to break any format, as you mentioned, redundancy is a huge part of it, and so I would agree. It's a big thing here.
Oh, all right. Going down the list, we have Another riff on an old card. This one a little bit more strictly different. This is Staff of Completion. 3 mana for an artifact. You may tap it to pay 1 life to destroy target permanent you own. You may tap it and pay 2 life to add 1 mana of any color. You may tap it and pay 3 life to proliferate. You may tap it and pay 4 life to draw a card, and you may pay 5 to unstaff it, to untap Staff of Completion. This is a Staff of Domination is the card that's a riff on a common win condition in Commander, one of the like best infinite mana win cons that you can kind of create, or a win, if you have a creature that can produce more than 5 mana, you go infinite with it on its own. This is not that card, but it does do a lot of different things. It's a underrated mana rock. I think that's the thing that like a lot of people are kind of missing. It's like for 3 mana, pay 2 life to add 1 mana of any color that also can draw you a card, that also acts as a sack outlet, that also can proliferate and has the ability to also, once you get to 5 mana, draw you 2 cards a turn, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's going under the radar there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think when you were naming the cost to activate it, I think you mixed the first couple up a little, but it doesn't even really matter because they're all pay life is the difference. That's the big.
I said mana versus life. Sorry, yeah.
Or even the numbers, but point being, all the abilities Alex mentioned are the abilities in the order he mentioned. It's just the totals were a little different. But my point in saying that is that paying life is distinctly different than paying mana. That's where the design of this card is so different than Staff of Domination, is that any infinite mana with Staff of Domination just wins the game. Like, you can do all of the abilities in a million times, and so like you just win. This card, having played this, I haven't actually played this in Constructed yet. I've played this in Limited a couple times. What ends up happening is you draft this card, as you mentioned, specifically for the mana rock ability. You draft it on, you go, okay, worst case scenario, if nothing else I'm doing, this is going to fix my mana. And then if I have enough life, I'll be able to draw a card for 4 life. Like, that's kind of the idea. But like the life pay thing is pretty high here. It's like not easy to do. Like, it's a lot of life. So using this in most situations more than a couple times is going to kill you. If you try to draw cards twice, you've paid almost half your starting life total. So like, this card is really cool. I do think destroy target permanent you own is a unique ability. It's not a super common thing that exists. There are sacrifices, but that wording is very unique, so that's worth pointing out. And then I think having something that can proliferate every turn for no mana is also really good, depending on what you're doing. Like paying 3 to get another counter on a planeswalker, or something where the counters really matter, that's a place where paying life actually does really matter. I think paying, oddly enough, looking at this card, the ability that is usually most relevant, which is draw a card, is almost unplayable. I think pay 4 life, draw a card, like, you have to be in a deck that can, you have to be able to mitigate that pretty hard to do more than do that once. Like,
well, I think that's the backup plan, right? Like it's the same as like drawing the cards off of Sylvan Library. Sometimes you just do it. Sometimes like you just win the, like, if you're like, oh man, if I could just have one more card, I could like win here. Like, I think that, or like, I'm planning on winning the game, I need to just make in a storm deck or something that has like needs a lot of mana, or just like you have what you need, but you might need more cards. I think you use that ability. I think there's a stabilization effort. Or if you're like, oh, I'm dead unless I draw the right thing, but I could have drawn the right thing, then you activate this. You're like, oh, I drew the right thing, I cannot die. Like, I think that's a versatility feature more than
calling it,
anything else.
Calling it unplayable is probably actually like the unfair assessment. That word should not be used there. It's more like, normally when you look at a card and it has multiple abilities, and draw a card is one of them, it's one of the primary abilities. It's almost like, this is why this card's in my deck, because I can. And when I look at this card, the fact that draw a card is the 4 life one just makes it feel like you're probably not utilizing this card for that reason specifically.
The other place that like not considering is like in a like life gain dedicated decks, like specifically like looking at Soul Sisters. That is a deck that has no problem paying life, but has a massive problem drawing cards. True. Right? Like it gets outvalued very easily, but it has all the life it could ever want. And it's a deck that definitely can take advantage of the proliferate target and could use the mana ramp. So it's not something that can, and to be honest, like doesn't hate a sack outlet necessarily. like I think this card is actually very good in that deck, right? Where like every feature on it is probably useful. Up to the late game of just like using it as a way to draw a bunch of cards with all the life you've gained if you're not able to capitalize on it. Other places like this isn't happening anymore, but there are, if your deck has an infinite life combo in it and you just like need
Oh,
ways to
sure.
take advantage of it, right? Like I think that's where the card draw effect comes in too, right? Where like I have a deck that can gain an obnoxious amount of life, but then can't draw the cards to get me there because I'm in red white and I just don't have good card draw. This gives you that.
I think you and I can probably both agree, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. This card is currently less than $6. I think long term this is going to go up because it's usable in
Yes.
a lot of different places, and it's a very inexpensive mythic that has colorless utility that goes in every commander deck ever if you want to play it, and even probably has some constructed playability if it gets in the right deck. This to me feels like 3 years from now is a $30 card. Like I think
Yeah.
pretty comfortably.
I already see CDH players talking about like how people are underrating this card because it's a 3-mana rock that then becomes a 3-mana card draw engine.
Yeah.
And they're comparing it to Sylvan Library, a card that like is extremely powerful in the format. So yeah, I agree.
Actually, even more importantly, foils are $7. That's notable.
Yeah, and I would buy foils, not
Regulars, yeah.
not non-foils. Next card, 3 green, white, blue, black. 4 colors, Atraxa Grand Unifier. Phyrexian Angel 7/7. Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink. When Atraxa Grand Unifier enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand, put the rest of the bottom of your library in random order. This is seeing a ton of play in Standard. This is seeing some play in Modern and Pioneer. In Modern, it's in a weird spot because right now, it being a legendary creature is actually a pretty big negative in regards to its skill ability suite because the best reanimator spells in the format are specifically for non-legendary creatures. But the thing that everyone missed when this was previewed and then figured out later on is it's an ETB, not a cast trigger, which often these days it's more of a cast trigger. And so this card in a Goryo Vengeance style deck draws you a lot of cards and then is encouraging you to play them with Ephemerate and cards like Ephemerate to then, for on turn 3, Goryo's Vengeance, this into play, cast Ephemerate, blinking it, draw 3 cards. This now gets to stay in play because Ephemerate took off the Goryo's Vengeance sack effect that was applied to it. You now have a 7/7. On your next turn, you can then blink it again and start just gaining a lot of value. I do think it's like just hitting the mark just because Goryo's Vengeance is just not strong enough at the moment. But if they're and it's not red, so like the one color you need to discard it doesn't have. But I think like its power level in other formats is not to be not unassumed, but is not to be ignored for Modern.
I would agree with you. Yeah, I think it's super powerful, and I think what you just mentioned is completely relevant to the card.
I think it's also like maybe the best alternative to Elishnorn in a Gifts deck.
Oh, interesting.
Just because like a lot of times you want Elishnorn, right? Because Elishnorn is the board bite, but sometimes your opponent is not like is more of a like I need more cards in my hand than you have, and less of a I need to kill your creatures or have like a beatdown strategy. And this beats down a lot better. It stabilizes a lot better than Elishnorn does against anything that's not an X2. And it draws you cards to replace the threat.
How big is it? A 7/7?
It's a 7/7 flying vigilance death touch lifelink.
Yeah, it's so big. I mean, I guess it's very good. Like, really, if we're talking about Modern, do you think you're playing more than one of these in a deck?
No, you play one, right? Oh, well, if you're playing a Goryo's Vengeance style deck, that's a deck that you're playing like 4 of these and 4 Grizzlebrand, right? And then your goal is to like drawing this, like to mill it or whatever. Like you want to guarantee you're going to get one of those into your graveyard off of a like Edging Crab or something. Like whatever the best mill strategy is, or because mono red discard has gotten so much worse without Faithless Looting.
Yeah.
In Gifts, it's you play as a one of, right? You have one Elishnorn, one this, and probably one like hard to get rid of threat, like Inkwell Leviathan used to be. And then you just end of your opponent's turn, gifts and given, get this, get Unbearable Rights, untap, cast Unbearable Rights, get this, draw 3 cards or 4 cards, and now your opponent's just buried in value in your blue-white, your Esper control list. So that's I think what that shell is looking to try and do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think this card was going to be that good when it was first printed. Obviously, I want to say just before we went to Philly for the show, like 5 days earlier or 3 days earlier, it like blew up in price. People got like super hyped about this card. So I opened it in my first pack and I was like, oh, this is like a couple bucks, right? And somebody was like, no, that card's like insane. Like that card's worth a lot of money. Like,
because you also got like the altar version, right? So it was like $60 to $70 is what you opened versus well, and because it also is going to get better with battle when battles come out. But like, remember, you could build this deck in a way that you can draw pretty much guarantee 3 cards every time it enters battlefield, and then up to like 5 without too much like luck. If you're playing like a few good planeswalkers, a few good sorcery and instant removal spells, a few creatures, obviously you're playing lands, like that's not that hard to just like, oh, in my top 10 cards, most like I have 4 or the 5 card types, and so like 4 mana, get a 7/7 flying lifelink vigilance, draw 5 cards is like an insane play to play at the end of your opponent's turn.
Yeah, it's very good.
All right, next card. We are at Mr. Jace the Perfected Mind. 2 blue, Phyrexian blue, legendary planeswalker Jace completed. You may pay it to pay 2 life or blue, and if life is paid, it enters with 2 less counters, so it comes in as a 3 loyalty versus 5 on 3 mana versus 4. Until end of turn, up to 1 target creature gets -3, -0. -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. So -2, draw a card, or draw 3 cards, or draw 3 cards. Or -X, target player mills 3 times X cards. So at a base level,
I was going to say we talked about this a ton, like 3 weeks ago when it was first previewed. This was like a card that you and I expounded on for a good like 20 minutes, because I think we both felt like for 3 mana, the value of what this card was doing was super high. Now, I will say, since then, I've not really heard the buzz on this card still. I'm like surprised now that people have opened it and are playing with it. But I believe what I said before. I think we were right. I think like as time passes, people will realize that the effect this card's offering is significantly better than what other things do. Oh, go ahead.
No. So it has, and these are in like daily 5.5.0 experiences, but it has seen play in Murktide Regent decks, and it has seen play at, and it is now a 3 of in the blue black modern mill decks.
Yes, which makes sense.
Which makes that's a ton of sense, right? On turn 3, you're pretty guaranteed to just like be able to draw 3 cards off of that deck. It stabilizes you. It stabilizes you doubly well because you'll have like crabs and stuff in play to block for you. And then it can also just come down on turn 4 and mill your opponent 15, which is often good enough when you're spent the first 3 turns milling them upwards of 30 cards. So not surprising for sure.
I think again, like just in case you didn't listen to that last episode, if you think about the rate you are getting on a sorcery speed card that mills, the most sort of shining example was Glimpse the Unthinkable. That was like for years the best version, right? Blue black sorcery, mill 10. Target player mills 10. They then updated that with a bunch of other versions that were trying, Hideous Laughter, and like Mind Funeral was a card that got played, and there was all these, and the crabs too, of course. But like in terms of the spells themselves, like getting that rate of 10 for 2 was always something. So this is literally if you were casting Glimpse for 3. It's 15 for 3 at sorcery speed. It costs you 2 life to do it.
No. It's 9 for 3.
No, it comes down on 5. It's target player.
No, it comes down on for 3 mana. It comes down at 3.
Oh, you lose. You're right. I'm sorry. I mixed that up. Yeah. So it's
15. It's 15 for 4, which is and you have many other choices than doing that. It's 3 mana, you can mill them for 9, or you can -2 to draw a card and mill them for 3. There's a bunch of different versatile swingy things on it. That's one of the reasons that I really like it, though, is it like in a mill deck, it's the Swiss Army knife that does 4 different things that you want. Draws you cards, mills your opponent while drawing you a single card, protects you from a threat of theirs, turns off a Ragavan. Like on turn 3, this turns off Ragavan, right? Like if you need to get rid of those types of threats, this is able to do that. So that's the things I really like about it.
Yeah.
And end is just like 4 mana mill 15, right? Like late game, it's a great top deck in that deck because often it'll just win you the game.
I will say that from the perspective of what we just talked about a second ago with Staff of Completion, good as I think this card is, I don't see the price changing that much over the next few years. I think it'll be like a really good thing of what it's doing. I don't think, unless it becomes like the linchpin of a deck, I feel like it'll grow very slowly because it's pretty narrow in terms of what it's good doing.
I mean, it's gone a few weeks post release and sticking at $9. I think it
Yeah.
has room to go up, to be honest.
Okay.
Especially the special versions, right? Like the Phyrexian Oil Slicked one is already 45. Because I think this is also very good in Commander and like has even like CDH potential. Just because like if you have this and a few other cards, you can like fuel a Underworld Breach really well with it.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like if you have this and you have Lion's Eye Diamond and you have Underworld Breach, those 3 cards together, like Jace gets you enough cards into your graveyard that you're able to then use Lion's Eye Diamond to get the mana to pay for Jace, and then Jace will get you the 9 cards you need in your grave. Like you can keep kind of cycling that. You do lose life to do that, but you'll eventually draw to the cards you need for your combo. Like that has potential. The card draw feature of it's pretty good. Even the +1 is like good against like CDH has gotten a lot more aggressive these days. And like being able to turn off random Tinma creatures and like stuff like that is not irrelevant. But even then, like in Commander, like it mills a lot. Mill is really popular. This is going to be one of the best mill planeswalkers ever printed forever. And I don't think that's going away. Plus, it has like the iconicness of Jace's death.
Jace. Well, oh yeah, you're saying his death. I was just going to say the fact that it's just a good Jace. We haven't had that many. We've had like a few actually good Jaces. There's like this is like the 5th one or 4th one now that's actually legitimately good.
Yeah, I would rank this in the top 5 Jaces. I think I would go Mind Sculptor, Vringe Prodigy, Architect, Original, this.
I might put this ahead of. I might put this 3rd. I think this is doing something much more unique than the other 2. I think you can play other cards to mimic a Fact or Fiction or like a pretty good draw spell. Whereas I think the first 2 you mentioned, Mind Sculptor and Vrin's Prodigy, are like uniquely powerful. There's nothing like them. I think this feels like that to me. So I'd say this might be 3rd or 4th for me.
I mean, that's really strong praise. So sure.
Yeah.
I would argue this is better than Jace's Vrin Prodigy in Modern right now.
I mean, Vrin's Prodigy, as again, like there is this weird thing that has happened over the years where it's like it used to be we would say when something comes down, it has to do something when it enters the battlefield. But if it doesn't do something, if it costs 2, it's fine because like that's early enough in the game that you can sort of play it and then you can do something the next turn. I kind of feel like that's not as much the case as it used to be. I kind of feel like nowadays, if it comes down and it doesn't do anything on 2, and it's not like extraordinarily high powered, it's actually not good anymore. And that sort of feels like what's happened with Jace. It's like there are so many ways to make that card not good. It's a 0/2. If you remove the graveyard, it's just a looter in a lot of cases, and it's a slow looter at that, which is why I think that card is faded. I do still think the upside of that card is higher than the others other than Mind Sculptor. So I think you're correct. Mind Sculptor and that are still the top 2, but I do think this is more unique as number 3.
Yep. All right. Next card, Taivar. This is the Thor of Magic the Gathering, the new himbo. Taivar, Jubilant Brawler, 1 black, green, legendary planeswalker. Taivar, 3 loyalty. You may activate the abilities of creatures you control as though they had haste and tap up to 1 target creature. Mill 3 cards, then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. This is seeing play in Crabvine. This is seeing play in Yasmo Food. This is seeing play in Yawgmoth decks, in Enchantress decks, in Elves, and in Devoted combo. It's already starting to see play in Modern. it makes him I'm just gonna steal your thunder and
No, don't.
bring up the fact that this boy gets you a Mercurial in play
Oh.
for 3 mana. Baby, you thought Tarmogoyf was no longer good. Get ready.
Taivar. This card is it's very good. It has 3 things going on for it that are all very good. So first of all, it costs 3, which good rate for a planeswalker, right? We know that 4 mana planeswalkers sort of have to win the game. 3 mana planeswalkers can be value engines. And this being a rare planeswalker that does not have a final form. It's just a value card, but all 3 of the things printed on this card are very good. Like in green, a +1 to untap a creature is effectively a +1 generated mana. That's like that's what it's saying, and it's more than that. But at its base level, the 1 mana card that got this out on turn 2 untaps your 1-drop and casts something else, which is very good. Second part of it is the haste ability, which is like, okay, so now my mana creatures become storm creatures. Now my mana creatures can come down and then generate mana the same turn I play them as the game goes on. That's good. Not to mention like just attacking. And then finally, the -2 ability. I mean, we all love Mirror Superior, but like that's just good in all value-based green-black creature decks. Having a -2 that doesn't kill the planeswalker that gets a creature into play that has haste. Like you didn't even mention that. That's the thing. I didn't even think about this when we first saw the card. If this was to be played even in just your classic Superior Burning Cocoa type of deck, which is like abusing a silly Mirror Superior, right? Like if that's what I was doing, if I was like, Alex, I'm going to use Taivar to make Mirror Superior good. The -2 puts it into play with haste. That's
No. Oh, the -2 puts it into play with haste. Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Uh,
No, it doesn't.
yeah.
It taps for haste. Sorry, you're it's better. So like where I would be excited, like elves. There's a reason that Abzan Elves is now playing this and doing well with it to an extent, because this gives the ability for you to play, like you play this and then you play an Archdruid, and the Archdruid has haste.
Yes.
And then you can then tap Archdruid and then untap Archdruid with Taivar to then tap it again. So you've now made 8 mana or ostensibly 5 mana, or sorry, turn 1. Well, I guess on turn 3, turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Taivar, -2, put another elf into play. Turn 3, have 3 elves because you play Archdruid. Archdruid has haste. You tap it, maybe 4, because the elf that you reanimated with Taivar also had haste. So you maybe had 1 more elf you put in place. So 3 elves plus Archdruid, tap her for 4, untap, tap it for another 4. 8 mana on turn 3.
I got excited. Yeah, you're correct. I was thinking the haste ability. So it does not make Superior as good as I thought, but you're right. Like the version of the elves deck that is that much faster, and that's what I was saying with the 1-drops. That just even the thing that casts this thing, like all of the things that come into play while it's in play get so much better. That's why I think the card is good. So this is actually another one of the cards from this set that I think over time probably goes up.
I've seen a lot. I mean, it's a rare, which makes it hard, but I would buy like the manga art version of it, which will become like the step and repeat foil manga one will like go up over time for sure. But like the fact that it's seeing play in so many different modern archetypes, and it's a 3 mana planeswalker, which we've always talked is really important. Multiple of the decks that it's seeing play in, like outside of just like Abzan Elves, which is like really cool that it's making that relevant again. The fact that it's seeing play in Yawgmoth decks, right? Like that's like not a thing to underrate. Like that is a top tier deck in the format, and it makes sense that this card is seeing play in it because it rebuys things. It gives some of your creatures like Birds of Paradise and Ignoble Hierarch haste, which is extremely powerful, as we mentioned. Not to mention just giving your other things like abilities that normally they wouldn't be able to activate as quickly. The fact that in Crabvine, a deck that I personally love, it acts as both a self mill target while also turning on your just the cards you need to be able to get stuff into play, like is not surprising. So I'm pretty impressed in how many of these decks it's seeing play in, and its interaction with Mana Dorks, which makes sense, right? He's an elf. He's like an elf prince, right? He's an elf lord ostensibly, and his abilities feel very elf lordy, even though he is not himself an elf card on play. So I think this is the best piece of gas Elves has gotten in years, more so than the elf card that they got in Dominaria that like was Hexcatcher's like counterpart. This is the thing that I think could make Elves actually have legs.
Well, because it's not just a thing. We've talked in the past about 1-drops and 2-drops, but this as a 3-drop, like I said, it has 3 abilities that are relevant. They're all good. If any deck that wants to use this will utilize all 3 abilities, and that's what the elf deck is doing.
And like basically in Elves, the best deck to probably try and get a 3-drop on turn 2 in a way that's protected. It protects itself because it puts a creature that it mills into play. The creature that it puts into play, if it is a mana dork, it generates mana. So it also is really a 2-mana planeswalker at that point, because you can then play another card from your hand. And in Elves, a lot of your cards are 1-drops that can take advantage of it. And then it has the ability to do nutty things by untapping Elf. Yeah, like it's perfect for that deck. It's really cool. The next card we are going to be talking about is Skrel's Hive. 1 and a white enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. As long as your opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. This has already started seeing play just in general in Hammer Time decks as a standard part of those decks, as well as Infect going into white to add this there as well. This, if you want to pick a card that is most similar to, is Bitter Blossom.
Yeah, I think the place that I look at this card that feels different, because from its core rate, right? It's an enchantment. It's an enchantment or an artifact. Enchantment, right?
It is an enchantment.
So it's the same as Bitter Blossom in that sense. You lose a life in the same way, right? They get a 1/1 flying fairy. You get a 1/1 can't block Toxic Might. So they have evasion. You've got toxic. But I do think the thing that is most significant is that artifacts coming into play, triggering something or number of artifacts you control in play, is something that is harder to accomplish than creatures. There are less artifacts in the game than creatures. So I do think from that perspective, this card is very interesting. Like, I've built many decks in many formats that are looking to count my number of artifacts, whether it's for like an affinity or it's a Mox Opal or it's a shrapnel blast or something like that, galvanic blast, whatever it is. This card giving you an artifact, I think, is totally interesting. I don't know if I would say it's like better than or worse than Bitter Blossom. It feels like for exactly that reason, it's about as good. And Bitter Blossom, sadly, does not see really much play in Modern right now. So it feels like this is cool in, as you mentioned, Hammer Time, which is a white deck that is heavily artifact driven. But even so, I will say, like, having played this card so far only in limited, coming down on turn 2, getting a creature the next turn, no haste, it is a little slow. Like, in the same way that Bitter Blossom always was.
Yeah, I think I would say this is better than Bitter Blossom, but I agree with you that it still is probably not going to be format defining, and maybe the way some of the next cards are going to be.
Yes.
All right, next card. Michaelson Gardens, land, sphere. Tap it to add 1 colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Or you may pay X and tap it to have it become a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. This card has already started seeing play in Lantern control decks, which have won things for the first time in the wild. Hardened Scales decks, Hammer Time decks, and Amulet Titan decks. And Amulet Titan, obviously, you can use it to copy Amulet itself, which is a pretty nutty thing to be able to find with Primeval Titan because you stop maximizing those triggers. And then scaling down, all these other decks are basically artifact decks that it has a little bit more utility. One thing that's interesting is that a lot of decks that are specifically like 1 mana artifacts are the things you're copying. You're not trying to go bigger than that, but I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, at its core, this card is doing something that takes a heavy advantage of cheap artifacts. And so you just look at the places where cheap artifacts have been the most valuable. And you mentioned Hammer Time comes to mind, right? Like, this can become a copy of a Colossus Hammer. If you've got Pure Steel Paladin, then you can equip this as a second copy and just kill them. I mean, that deck wins without this, so it's not totally necessary. But again, you mentioned Amulet Titan, so like getting the double trigger off of a bounce land on itself. If you have 2 amulets in play, like just a single bounce land on its own, literally almost just casts Primeval Titan. You're not far from it. Yeah, I think it's good. The fact that it also has decent mana utility. This card, like, it's just a pretty good land. It's not just a bad land that has a cool ability.
Yep. And a land with utility is always going to be powerful, and this one can't fix your mana if in a pinch for a little. It makes it expensive. Is a land untapped source that can do that, which is also very powerful and has a utility ability that is the potential to double up things you're doing in ways that make it broken. Right, that like Amulet's like a classic version of, right. Like Amulet is a card that like Wizards kind of expected to not be very good, and you really need multiples for it to really break. Well, this lets you do multiples in it in a deck that's very easy to search this up. So it's sick in that way. The next card, Mercurial Spelldancer. 1 blue, 2/1. Mercurial Spelldancer can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. Whenever Mercurial Spelldancer deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spells this turn, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy.
So the first thing you have to ask yourself when you read this card is, okay, for blue 1, 2 power, how many creatures that can't be blocked have ever been printed, right? This is different than like a flying 2/1 with flash that I like. It's similar, but it's the same idea of how many. And now, even though we joke about those flying 2/1s, we're at like 5 in history now. Unblockable 2/1s for 2, there's not very many. That's what this card is at its core, right? Then you add to the fact that like 2 Serum Vision type effects, to Serum Vision consider Thought Scours. Now put the counters on this thing where next time you attack, it's like your opponent's like, I'm going to kill this thing anyway. I'll kill this the first time I see it. It feels actually very similar to the 1/3 for red 1 that casts a spell for its power or less
Sure.
when it attacks. That guy.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of idea. Sorcery speed 2-drop. This is going to attack. It'll probably get value because you'll cast this on turn 2. You attack on turn 3 for 2 mana. But if you have cast 2 spells, if you just are in a spells deck and you cast like a Bauble and a Consider or something, and then you attack, deals damage, great. I'll remove 2 counters and bolt you for 6. Or I'll remove 2 counters and I'll consider twice. Like, it's that easy. And
yeah.
It like the 2 counters is nothing. I think this is already seen play in Legacy. This was a card that when I read it when it first came out, I was like, I think that'll be pretty good. And then having seen the play pattern, played with it and limited a bit myself, I've added this to Highlander now. This card's very good. Like, especially because there are so many spells that are free or 1, like 0, free or 1, right? They can pay life or something in constructed formats that you can go nuts with this card. I know Is It Prowess in Modern is like a top 15, top 10 deck again. This feels like a card that could be an Is It Prowess in a heartbeat. It's an extra every single turn.
For me, the big thing I think that's fighting against it is Ledger Shredder, right? Like you want to be playing this as your 4 through 8 Ledger Shredder. Now, that being said, it has seen play in Is It Breach decks, and it has seen play in Murktide decks, so I'm not surprised that it has potential there, and I think it's an alternative win con and value engine to stuff that people maybe are bringing in against those decks, be it Graveyard Hate or Ragavan Hate, and this is a card that kind of dodges anything that blocks it and also doesn't care about the graveyard. But I do think it has a pretty specific, it's a pretty tight spot that it's falling into now. The flying Tarmogoyf.
I will say that this card with Manamorphose seems crazy to me. I do love the idea of a deck that is taking advantage of this in Manamorphose, where you are perhaps casting spells to get extra mana steps or something like that. And this is like getting you cards and accelerating your mana, and like now you're able to, you know what I mean? Saying like there's I think this card lends itself to an engine in a way that Ledger Shredder really doesn't. This card can do pretty stupid stuff.
Next card is Sword of Forge in the Frontier. 3 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and from green. Whenever a equipped creature does combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. This is the red-green card on the cycle. My biggest complaint for this card is its name is dumb. It doesn't. I've never heard of Forge and Frontier as a classic. Like, it's not like Fire and Ice or Light and Shadow. They're not like opposed forces that are classically said body and mind, right? It's Forge and Frontier and Forge don't even feel like opposites. I feel like if I were to go to the Frontier, I would find Forges.
Yeah, if you were like, hey, Forge, what's the first one you think of? No way. We talked about this card in the same way a decent amount a few weeks back, so we won't go like super heavy into it, but I will say about this is the best of the swords that's been printed in a few years. You know, the last really, really insanely good sword came out in like 10 years ago almost. I think Feast and Famine was almost 10 years ago. I like some of the ones since then. They're fine. It's not like I don't think that the Horizons ones are pretty good, but to me, this is the first value sword since Feast and Famine that is like, oh, this feels really powerful. Like this is doing a lot of what I would want a sword to do. Problem with that being Modern doesn't play a lot of them. If a Stoneforge deck wants to play one, it's playing the one that's good in the meta at the time as like a 1 of or a 2 of maybe to like protect against colors. But this is good because it's value, not because it's red green. It's just good because it has a lot of value. This card's better, and this card is exceptionally good in Commander. Like it's a super value.
Not even just Commander. The reason this is so high on the list is because of Pioneer. It's seeing like, because it's the only sword and Pioneer is a power level where swords are good. In Modern, it's seeing play in Boros mid-range decks. It's seeing play in some of the Stoneblade decks. Like, so there are decks playing this card, but in Pioneer, it's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's been in 7 different decks that have placed in tournaments, and a significant one in the top 2, top 1 or 2 slots. So like that's pretty significant for a card like this that I think is and often I would say Pioneer is a first testing ground for standard cards to see will they see play in Modern, unless like they need fetch lands, right? Like if it's good in Pioneer, there's a chance this could see play in Modern, and adding, there is one piece in Modern that this card doesn't get the benefit in Pioneer, and that is Stoneforge Mystic. So I do think it has a lot of potential to grow in Modern in a way that some of the other swords haven't, because to your point, this is comparable to like the value you generate and how far ahead you can get if you're playing this with a Stoneforge Mystic in a control deck where you're able to draw cards off of it and ramp. Like classically in control, the control deck that has more lands in play and more cards in hands will win, and this lets you do that.
There was classically a Keswick Wolfrun deck back in Standard like 10 years ago. The last time swords were in Standard, and the premise of the deck was like, play a Bird of Paradise, cast a sword on turn 2, equip your sword, attack, win the game. Like it was like just like take over with like heavy value. And Birds of Paradise is not legal in Pioneer, but there are enough 1-drop creatures that you can play that are.
Wait, is Birds of Paradise not legal in Pioneer? I guess it's not. Weird.
Yeah, I think the last time it was in Standard was like definitely before Pioneer.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's weird.
Yeah, I think.
Unsubscribe. No format is good without Birds of Paradise.
I know you can Gilded Goose into a turn 2 sword and then equip your sword and attack with your goose. That's for sure a thing you can do.
Llanowar War Elf and Elvish Mystic are in Modern or in Pioneer.
But I think why I say that is it's a flyer. That was the whole point of like the old Bird of Paradise deal, was you could cast it and then you would equip your sword and have evasion. So, but yeah, anyway,
it has protection. I mean, like it's seeing play in Mono Green Devotion, which is like I think it's good for sure. Next card on the list, Minor Misstep, 1 blue for an instant counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. It's like Mental Misstep, but slightly better, and in Modern more powerful, partially because you can counter 0-cost mana spells, which includes, very importantly, the things that cards are cascading into out of the Cascade decks. It also includes Ragavan. It also includes amulets. There's so many good 1-drops, including some of the cards we've talked about and we'll be talking about next. It gets rid of removal spells in the format. It does not fight off against the evoke creatures, but everything else under the sun, very powerful card. And it's fixed Mental Misstep, which is good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look over the years and they print a new cheap interactive counterspell, there seem to be sort of 2 kinds. There are like the pretty good 2 mana, like this, like Lofty Denial is a good example of a card that's like, this card is pretty good. Like Lofty is a really, really well designed card. It fits really nicely into a lot of decks. And then there are cards like Offer You Can't Refuse, which is like uniquely designed and pushed, and this one feels more like in that range. This kind of reminds me of Miscast, a little bit in terms of just like
Oh, I
what
would say this is maybe way better, but yeah, that's fair.
it's significantly better than Miscast. I mean, there's no question. Like this is a more powerful card, but it reminds me of it in the way that like it is a it is still a narrow card in your deck. It's not
Mhm.
in modern. I guess it's pretty specific, but even in modern, like not every deck plays everything that costs 1 or 0. There's a lot of things that do. But even like when someone does like, somebody like evokes like a solitude, that doesn't cost 1 or 0. They're paying 0 for it, but this is not going to interact with that card.
Well, but like in modern, as far as like important cards that every deck is playing to some extent, like if you're talking the crashing footfall decks, this counters the card, footfalls. It counters the counter spell. The main thing they're cascading into. This is a hard counter to her. In Hammer Time, it counters Hammer. It counters all of their 1-drop creatures. It counters Skrel. In every Ragavan deck, it counters Ragavan. In Yawgmoth, it counters Young Wolf. It counters all the Birds of Paradise variants under the sun.
There's no doubt this card is
Yeah.
very good. I think more what I mean is like
Like, I
if
don't think there's a
you
deck in the top 15 decks that doesn't play a key one, like at least 2 key 1-drops that this is good against.
I think what I more mean is if this is in your hand and you're holding on to this, and now this is your piece of relevant interaction to try to like not lose. There are a lot of really relevant cards that are played at key moments that don't cost 1.
Sure.
It's a very good card. I think your main deck in modern could probably get away with 2 of these in a main deck pretty easily. I don't know if you could go more than 2 in a main because like
part of me wonders if this is a 4 of like
really.
Well, like if especially if a deck did get rid of it, like the decks maybe a 4 of in the 75. The decks of this is like there's no deck that this is bad against, right?
But
there's a lot of decks that this is backbreaking against. Like
when I say 2 of versus 4 of, I'm talking main. I think this could easily be a 4 of in a sideboard. I think without a doubt. But I think about interacting with like a deck where you're like counter war and they're like Force of Negation. You're like, oh,
right.
Your spell that you're paying 0 for actually costs 3. My 1 mana spell is no longer relevant. Like there's a lot of things in modern that cost 0 technically that are very commonly played. All the elementals, several of the forces. There are a lot of really important cards in those situations where this card's going to be in your hand. You're going to want it to do something that it's not going to do anything. That's why I think like in a main, I could see 2. I could see 4 in 2 in a board, 2 in the main. I could see 4 in a board, but I don't think I could go past 2 in a main.
Sure. Yeah, obviously I think like it's better for the format than Mental Misstep because you're not playing the like 0 card. Every deck is playing this, but there are so many decks that this like straight up wins against, and the decks that it doesn't win against, it's so good against the main threats of the format like Ragavan.
Yeah,
that to me it feels like a thing you like I think it's like a 3 of, right? Like I think you play it in the same way that we used to, you play Inquisition of Kozilek. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's as relevant as that, where you played like 3 of these and 3 counter spells, and then that's your like counter spell suite, and you can get pretty far with that.
It's a great opening hand card. That's the thing I'll say is like it's a phenomenal. I draw my opening hand, then I have one of these in it. That's exciting because it's good.
Yeah. I will say art wise, like it feels like whatever this guy's dealing with is more than a minor misstep. It feels like he's in the middle of being like electrocuted from every angle. And he's
yes,
all right, next card on the list. Green, Cankerbloom, 1 in a green, Phyrexian Fungus, 3/2, pay 1, sacrifice Cankerbloom, choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, proliferate. The most recent variant of Kozali Pride Mage. This one does come with the proliferate trigger, and is in mono green, and is a 3/2 for 2, which I think is all pretty phenomenal.
Yep. This card is really good. It is a card that has lots and lots of things printed on it. It is proliferate is such a weird ability because it's like it in theory proliferate is good. Like it seems like it has a case where it's good in most situations, but there are also plenty of situations and plenty of decks that would want to play this card where proliferate's irrelevant and where Pride Mage is going to be a better card. Like Pride Mage is going to be a 2/2 for 2 in green white that is going to make the less important creatures you're attacking with, bigger, and like so I do think that's good. Pride Mage hasn't seen play in Modern for a while. It's not really a card that sees much play anymore. There are certain decks that occasionally will play it at the sideboard, but it's not a thing. Even to some degree, decks that play Knight of Autumn have slowed down. Like those types.
I don't think Knight of Autumn hasn't seen play in a long time. I think
That's what I'm saying. Like I think they've. I'll see Knight of Autumn sometimes in certain deck sideboards because, for obvious reasons, it's very good. But I don't know if there's a deck right now that is trying to take advantage of like.
Well, it is seeing play in Yawgmoth decks. It's seeing play in like the Hardened Scales deck. It's done well in already. I think like it offers an alternative to the new the Might, the Haywire Might, which is now one of the most played cards in the format, right? Like it's a top 5 creature in the format at the moment. Partially because it's, you know, it stabilizes, it is able to be found off of Urza Saga, and it exiles target non-creature artifact or enchantment. The problem is that there are creatures that you want to be able to kill, and this card allows you to get rid of them. And that proliferate trigger, if it's relevant, is very good, right? Like proliferate goes from not being good to being amazing the moment that switch over changes. If you have any synergies with it, it starts becoming like, oh, could kill a person, right? Like in fact, this is a hate card that is a top tech win condition where like previously, in fact, was playing like the 2 mana, 3 mana 2/2 that ETBs and destroys an artifact or creature. I would play this over that any day of the week because this for 3 mana wins me the game if they're at 9 infect versus that where I have to like play it, then get in for an attack. That's a lot more effort.
I think where Alex and he mentioned that he was the one organizing the list. I would disagree with you on this card by a few slots. I think this is a little lower. This is probably in the bottom 5 of our top 15, more so than where it sits for me. I just think the mana that it costs. If you could sack this creature for free, cost 2 for a 3/2, and the abilities were all sacrificed for free, I would be like all about it. There's something about the fact that it costs mana that makes me less inclined. But I mean, it's good. I would still have put this on my list. I just think it's a little high for my taste.
All right, next card on the list. Soulless Jailer, 2 mana 0/4. Artifact creature Phyrexian Golem. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. Welcome to, Grafdigger's Cage that can be found with Collected Company or Court of Calling or an Eldritch Evolution or any tutor or creature thing you could ever need.
It's also, it's a 0/4, which we've always talked about. I don't think Lightning Bolt is as defining in the format as it once was, but Murktide's a very good deck. So
Lightning Bolt's still super. Yeah, I think Lightning Bolt's still super relevant. I agree. I think that it dodges Lightning Bolt. The fact that it's an artifact also means it has artifact synergies. You can get this with Karn. You can find it with different artifact tutors. Like it has the benefits. It's not findable with Urza Saga, but also being as 2 mana 0/4 as a Spellskite enthusiast will tell you is relevant. That is a big butt to put down and play real early that Ragavan just looks at angrily, shaking its little monkey fist.
I will say that it's interesting. Every time they go deeper into a 4 toughness creature for 2 mana that has a really relevant ability, it makes me think about the Doran style decks and how like at a certain point, isn't someone just going to play like 4 of this card, 4 Spellskite, 4 Doran. There's the green, I think it's called Assault Formation. And just like, they just become a Hate Bears beatdown deck where all of their creatures are super, super, super pushed. Like, and they're also not afraid of pushing like, it's like Nyx Fleece Ram. Isn't that like a 0/5 or a 1/5 for 2 that gains you a life every turn? There's just like all these cards. I mean, that card's bad, but I'm just trying to think about things that have a high toughness rate that are playable in Modern that are in those colors. And Doran gets no love. The card sees no play. But like,
well, I also think like the fact that this stops Dwathy Voidwalker, because like the exile part is not to be underestimated, right? Voidwalker, this stops Ragavan, not just as an attacker, like I mentioned before, but also you can't cast the spells that it exiles. It stops any type of red exile effect. It stops anything that's trying to cast spells, from the graveyard or have creatures like all the any Phoenix card or like it turns off so many powerful things this format tries to do without effort and is good as a generic blocker for the control deck that wants it without effort as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely good. I've been surprised with how little love it's gotten since it was printed. Like it feels like people haven't talked about it as much as I would have expected because it feels good. But that cards that are like this that have this sort of sideboard love that often is the case. It'll take a few
Yeah.
years before it's out
I
of
will,
standard and people don't have them.
and I will say this is a card that like pay attention to exactly what it stops, right? Like players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. They can cast creature ones, so like it doesn't turn that half a Ragavan off. Or permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, but you like creatures can't enter the battlefield, but they can enter from exile. So it's like a little weird where different effects get caused from different effects. And this
Yeah.
doesn't like Grafdigger's Cage stop like Cascade because you can cast stuff from your library. All right, top three, baby. Number three, we have Skrel the Defector Might. 1 white for a legendary artifact creature, Phyrexian Might. For toxic 1, players dealt damage by this creature also get a poison counter. It can't block. You may pay a Phyrexian mana and tap it to choose a color. Another target creature you control gains toxic 1 and hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by a creature of that color this turn. 1/1. So we have Mother of Ruins, we had Aunt of Ruins, now we have Pet Might of Ruins.
Yeah, it's like a combination of like a Glistener, Elf, and a Mother of Runes or something like that. This card's really powerful. It's the best use probably of Phyrexian mana in the set. I would argue. I think it's probably the most powerful thing that Phyrexian mana is doing in the set.
Well, the next 2 cards on the list do not have Phyrexian mana, so at a bare minimum, correct.
You made this list. I'll mind you. I'm just out here just giving you your flowers for putting this card so high.
I'm trying to think. Is there a thing on this list? I think this is the other than Jace. This is the only card with Phyrexian mana on the list at all.
They didn't push Phyrexian mana very hard in this set. They did
On
it in a much more
purpose, yeah.
balanced way. Yeah, I think this is the best use of it. I think in the same exact way that Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes don't have haste. They can get killed the turn they come down. They cost 1. That's why. Like this card's the same in that way. I think this card's really, really good. We're going to talk about a card in a second that I think is also very good. I think they're sort of like there are 2 different ideas for this slot that are quite pushed in the set.
Yeah.
Classic Infect in Modern's not been a thing that was a tier 1 deck for a little while now. It's been a little while since that was
doing better now, but yeah.
Yeah, because obviously because it's pushed now. We've played Highlander for years together, and I've had a green-white deck that is like sort of a double strike Infect deck. And this is one of the cards I was most excited to put into that deck because this does fit really well. It's the fact that the protection and the unblockability is there. It's doing a lot of the things that the other creatures in a poison deck want. That's the thing that's important. Is the toxic 1 is less.
But I don't even care about toxic. Like this is a card that's seeing play in grinding station decks. This is a card that's seeing play in Stoneblade decks. This is a card that's seeing play in Affinity. It's seeing him play in Infect, Hammer Time, Death and Taxes, Devoted combo. Like this is one of the best value creatures ever printed, in my opinion. You don't want too many of them.
For you, what makes this on that level where it's like such a high? What am I missing, or what is the listener missing? What's the thing?
An artifact creature. So it's an artifact mom. Like the hexproof ability on an artifact creature, and toxic is not irrelevant. Like in a lot of these decks, they can figure out ways to kill with it. But the fact that it's an artifact creature, so you're able to take advantage of it with artifact synergies while also being Mother of Ruins, Mother of Ruins, Auntie of Ruins, whatever the second one is called, is extremely powerful, right? Like it helps with grinding station. The fact that it's also a legendary is a big deal because of Mox Amber. Right, those 2 features together are massive. On their own.
That's true. It's really good.
And like the fact that you can play this Ragavan, Mox Amber, Grinding Station, all of that in one deck, and just like all these cards are good no matter which ones you draw in which order is like an insane situation to put yourself in. It makes combat with Ragavan so much more difficult than while also offering the same benefits that Ragavan offers. Right. So I think that to me is why it's. And for the record, Mother of Ruins is an insane card. Like if Mother of Ruins was in the format, I would think it's one of the best cards. It's in every format Mother of Ruins is. It is a top tier card.
I mean, I will say Giver. So Giver of Runes is not Mother of Runes. It's a little different. It's 10% different, and it doesn't see a lot of play in Modern. Like it's a pretty fringe card. It's not a big card in the format. I do think the artifact synergy you mentioned is important. Giver of Runes doesn't see a lot of play in the format. I mean, like I guess it's seen a little bit, but it's not like a primary card. So I think that this thing is offering some utility that that card isn't. But I don't. Your point about Ragavan and Amber, that's a really strong point. Like you can, that's a really cool thing.
It's an artifact creature. It's a legendary creature.
Yeah.
A regular core creature doesn't matter as a card type. Those two things have historically been some of the most powerful things and continuously the print synergies, which I think puts it over the edge, right? Because otherwise it and the other one, Ruin Giver are like very close. And Ruin Giver hasn't seen infinite play in Modern, but it's seen some play and it's seen decent play. And this is that with significantly more relevant capabilities and at the level that it could see play in Infect, and it does exactly what Infect needs because it protects your Infect creature from removal spells and in a way that's better than other cards because it's hexproof with color protection and unblockability. Like that's the other part, right? It can't be blocked by those colors. So the unblockability
deal,
it's protection offers a similar thing to that, but I think there's things in here that are very useful that the creature types then push it over the edge.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And like we're not even getting and it makes Tarmogoyf a little bit bigger, and you can find it with it has like weird other things that come with being an artifact creature that don't always get talked about. All right, top 2 cards. Next one is 1 green for a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid, Venerated Rot Priest, Toxic 1. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter.
I missed when I first read this card, and I first was getting hyped about this card because I'm more hyped about this card than any card in the set, just personally. I missed that it was any creature. I thought my brain couldn't go further. It was this card. Whenever you target Rot Priest, they get the counter. And that's the thing that is so much more nuts is like it protects, even if you're not comboing, this card protects your entire board in a poison deck. This card's super good. Like I
think this was the most under-evaluated card in the set, not because if you read it and understood what it did, everyone's like, oh, this card's bonkers. But understanding that every one of your creatures, understanding that it counted the things that you're casting, not just like a lot of people thought it was just like if an opponent targets your creature, they get a poison counter. A lot of people thought if your opponent only targets this creature, they get a poison counter. People not realizing also the fact that it's target of a spell means that like Storm is a repeated triggered effect as a part of this, or if you have something that like splits targets like a like Cryptic or whatever, then that also can do that. So just the fact that I think you're totally forgiven. The amount of people I got in arguments on Twitter talking about how good this card was, and then halfway through the conversation, they're like, "Oh, sorry, we've gone back and forth on 6 tweets. I didn't read the card."
I will say that when we were in Philly and we opened all of those collector booster packs, and we pack ordered like 10 of them, I think, because they were part of like various swag bags that we had bought passes for people for. You won like 4 and I won like 6, but in the 6 that I won were 3 full art borderless foils of this card. So I have like an entire playset of this card now.
I'm really happy about it.
Pretty sick actually. And this is the other card I put into that green white Highlander deck, and like I have the borderless foil and it's really dope.
And just like pointing at Modern, right? Like the reason this is number 1 is a little bit this, but like obviously Infect's back, right? Like in a bunch of the cards we've talked about, there are placing Infect decks, and it's off of the back of this with maybe a little bit of Skrel on the other side, but this is the card that's really put it over the top. But regardless of like just classic Infect, the amount of red green Storm decks that I've seen is bonkers, and the videos I've watched with them where they are like consistently winning on turn 2 without effort is kind of insane. Like this card is so powerful and offers such a cool win condition that like interacts on a level that you're normally not interacting with. And I would not be surprised if we end up in a world where like those decks figure out that there's a way to play that deck where you're not all in on the combo, but you're just like a good deck that has this as just an option, and you're playing like good instants and sorceries that go with it. Like it does such cool things
For those
so
that are
easily.
For those that are wondering what you're talking about with such an aggressive win con, there was a card from Time Spiral, a mono red sorcery for 1 red called Ground Rift that was printed back. They did like a series of mostly pretty bad storm cards from Time Spiral when they brought it back. There's 2 that are good. Most of them though, there was like 8 of them, maybe 6 of them. I can't exactly remember. But Ground Rift was a common from that cycle, and its target creature can't block this turn for 1 red sorcery, and it has Storm. Because this is the same set, mind you, that's got Grape Shot and Empty the Warrens, which are both iconic, incredibly good Storm cards.
Yeah.
But 2 mana and 4 mana are very different than 1 mana. Like if you're trying to go super low to the ground, and because all you have to do is target the Rot Priest, Ground Rift, every spell you cast up until that, they just turns into one spell equals 1 poison counter.
Yeah.
So if you can find a way to do something wild and interesting and Metamorphose and Storm out, Ground Rift just wins the game, which is what.
And you play Underworld Breach, which allows you to start rebuying all of these things and build up your storm count, and like it, and what's cool is it's a deck that doesn't need, like, your storm count doesn't need to get to 10 or 20, right? Like if you have 2 venerated rot pieces in play, and what the deck is playing a summoning pact, so you can like turn 1 venerating rot priest, turn 2 summoning pact, get a second, or like summoning pact, cast a ritual, cast Mana Forphos, play the summoning pact, play the second rot priest, and then groundswell. And as long as you've cast 5 spells that turn, which I think is what I just did, like, and that's like a normal amount of cards in a storm deck like this, because you have 2 rot priests in play, it just kills it. It's, that's all you need. It doubles the counters off of the storm count. So you're getting each trigger counts twice. So like it's really, really easy to just generate a board state where you win off of a really small storm count with the deck, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's really sweet. This card, for me, it's funny because I've covered Infect decks with you over the years in Modern for a long time. They've been good forever. But the one I've played the most is that green-white double strike Infect deck in Highlander. It's a thing I've done for years. And
Yeah.
when I looked at the previews of the set, this is the first time in a really long time where 2 cards were like, oh my God, these are like, Skrel and Rot Priest are both so good in a deck like that. Like they're both super pushed.
And playing, and like the fact that they stack is something that I think a lot of people also didn't realize. Like there's so many layers of this card that are kind of bonkers. And in like regular Infect, just like having them in play, all of your pump spells just unblockably do the damage. And it also generates one of the weakness that those decks had, which was not being able to like go like over the top, right? Like if eventually someone built a board state that could block you, this lets you get over that because you just start targeting your own spells and build the poison counters without needing to attack. So it's cool. I believe, am I correct that 2 spell skites also just win the game with it in play in a spell?
You cast a thing that targets it and you retarget. Yeah.
So if it also offers that combo in. So you play this. So the decks are now playing 2 spell skites because if you draw both spell skites and you have a venerating rot piece in play, you can target one of the spell skites, and then you can use the abilities on spell skites to bounce, to volleyball the spell target back and forth, triggering the venerated rot priest each time. You have to have enough life to be able to do that, or enough blue mana to be able to do that without paying the life to kill yourself. But as long as you have more, as long as they have 1 poison counter on them, or you give that much life, you can do it, which is cool as well. Number 1, 4 and a white for a 4/7 with vigilance, legendary creature, Phyrexian, Praetor, vigilance. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponent's control to trigger. Elish Norn, Mommy of Machines. Surprisingly seeing a ton of Modern play.
A lot's been said about this card already. There was uproar in the EDH community when this was first printed. It's a combination of factors that make it so good. Obviously, there's so much ETB in Magic that's been pushed over the years, which makes all of yours better, all of theirs worse. killing a 4/7 that costs 5 mana in Modern is pretty hard. Like, you have to have a pretty specific answer. For instance, a Revolted Fatal Push doesn't do anything. Lightning Bolt does nothing.
It turns off all of the elementals because their
The elementals
ETBs
are
don't
dead.
trigger.
Yeah. You can't kill it with Prismatic Ending. They're like, most of the things that like are commonly played that would get rid of this don't get rid of this. So
Terminate. I think Terminate is the only like consistently played card that kills this currently.
yeah, that's why people should be playing Pondify and Rapid Hybridization like champions.
Or play Junt. The fact that like Enchantress, Indomitable Creativity, Jeskai control, Amulet Titan, Boris midrange, Azorius control, 4-color Omnath, like the amount of different decks that are playing this card, and the fact that it just like is so hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's really good. And the fact that you're saying all these tier 1 decks that are playing it, to me, is interesting because like I still would have read this card and gone, I mean, best case scenario in Modern, this 5-drop is going to be a 1 or 2 of in particular control decks. But it's a testament to the strength of the card, which is like, it's just, and this is kind of a little bit of what that one, the RC wrote an article, I think, about it that was sort of like, this is like the shortcoming of this card for EDH. And it points out a lot of the core design of this card, which is like, at its core, Magic has been a game that has drifted towards enter the battlefield triggers. It's a really important part of design the last 10 years. It's a lot of like the fun part of creatures getting so much better is that you can spend 3 or 4 mana for something and you'll get something out of it, even if your opponent kills it. And what this card does is like, okay, well, all of mine are better and all of yours are bad. And it's a 4/7 for 5. And in Commander, it's more of a problem, obviously, because like you're not going to just have a target immediately. And if you play this as your commander, it's even worse. Modern, this feels much closer to the cards that are just that exist and are just playable. Like, it's just a 5-drop that doesn't do anything. So in theory,
but it's a 5-drop that, so like it doesn't do anything on its own, but it also doubles your Fury and or Solitude triggers, right? Like you pay this and then you Solitude, you get to kill 2 things, or you get to Fury for twice as many things, and it now turns off all of the removal spells. So I agree that it, like, when you read it, your brain says, I'm playing a 5-mana sorcery 4/7 that doesn't do anything when it enters play. But what it does is it makes it so every ETB you have doubles.
There is something very interesting to the idea that, okay, my last 3 cards in my hand are Solitude, some white card, and Elesh Norn. And it's like, okay, so what you're saying is that if I cast my Elesh Norn and then I exile this white card for my Solitude, actually exiling that white card just means I'm getting 2 Solitudes. Like, I'm just getting 2 of them. I lost nothing. I'm left with a 4/7 creature. Your ETBs are bad. And this card that I was going to exile for nothing a second ago just got rid of 2 of your cards. Like, that's pretty good in terms of the way you would sequence a normal hand. If Elesh Norn was something else, your hand is so much weaker there. Like, even if your hand, if that card is 3 mana Teferi, which is like a pretty played card in Modern and lots of decks, like, play Teferi,
format staple.
yeah, draw a card, like, similar to Elesh Norn, like, makes your opponents worse. It's not the same thing. Like, Teferi, best case scenario, is gonna minus and bounce their thing, and you're gonna be down a card to have lost your Solitude. Versus the Elesh Norn. Yeah, go ahead.
No, ironically, I think Teferi is one of the better answers against Elesh Norn.
Yeah, right, exactly. You can get rid of it. So, yeah. Anyway, I think this card's really good. I still feel like my play style as a player is like, this isn't going to end up in any decks I play. I mean, I
think it's this high. The reason I have it this high over Venerated Rot Priest is because Venerated Rot Priest is going to be good in a strategy, maybe 2 strategy, right? Like, it's very specific, where I think Elesh Norn is going to see wide play amongst the format and is maybe format altering, right? Like, I don't think any other card that we've mentioned on this list is like going to change, other than maybe Minor Misstep, which I'm in hindsight maybe think should have maybe been higher. But I don't think any other card other than those 2 is going to modify the way people build decks in Modern. Elesh Norn might. Like, I have to add Terminate into Juns, or I have to add in the blue-white Esper. I might bring Path to Exiles back, right? Because Leyline Binding doesn't hit it. Dress Down doesn't hit it.
Yeah,
like Prismatic Ending can't get, you have to be playing 5 color for Prismatic Ending to be able to hit it. Burnt the 1 mana red version that kills something does, like, there's so many. It's wild how many things don't work against this card in the format. And if you're playing the value decks, like I'm looking at the 4 color mid range deck on the opposite end, doubles your Omnath card draw, doubles your Fury, doubles your Solitude. Makes it so that your Dress Down draws you 2 cards when it enters the battlefield. Makes it so Leyline Binding exiles 2. Like the fact that it doubles your things is so cool. Yeah, this card's sick. I'm surprised how sick it is.
So on the subject of playstyle and cards that I play or you play or we would or wouldn't play, I am currently working on rebuilding my Highlander wheel because I only have 3 decks left. You and I played in Germany a lot. And I was trying to figure out the next deck I wanted to build. I came across this idea, and Elish Norn is a card that actually could go into this deck, maybe should go into this deck, but currently is not. So I am going to build the Mardu combo version that plays all of the like Stern Proctor, or is it called Stern Proctor? The 1/3 flyer that ETBs are countered unless a player plays 2. Leonin Arbiter, Torpor Orb, Hushwing Griff, every single Hate Bear white creature that stops ETBs, stops search, stops like all that stuff, right? Those are going to be like sort of the core of the deck. And then the combo that I came up with that I thought was so dope was Marilyn of the Mornsong with Opposition Agent. Have you seen this before?
Yep. Lock someone out. Yep. Really good.
It's so mean. Like you like end of turn Opposition Agent and then just resolve Marilyn. And it's like, oh yeah, good call. You'll never play this game again. Like I will get all, because like I'll search your library for the thing that I need to remove your attacker during your turn if you're going to kill me. And then on my turn, I'll search for the thing that stabilizes me. And now the game just ended, which is sick. But also Mardu, because Stranglehold, which I know is a card that an EDH people play, but I'd never played it in Highlander, which is an enchantment for those that don't know, for red 3. It is the only card in Magic that states opponents cannot search libraries. There are other cards that state that like effects controlled by opponents can't, or players can't search, but Stranglehold's the only one that specifically says opponents cannot search libraries. And also it states that if your opponent would take an extra turn, they don't take it. Yep. Those sort of things, and I'm going to play Orm's Chant as the other piece of the combo. Okay. And so I'm playing Mardu combo with all of the hand disruption, all the tutors, and I'm going to try to make this Maryland thing work, which I'm excited about because I actually have a Maryland from way back in the day. I opened it back when I was playing in Morningtide like a million years ago. So it's like sick. I can just like put this in the deck. Which I don't know if that card's gotten expensive. Do you know that? Maryland?
Sure. Yeah, because of Opposition Agent.
It's like almost $30 now.
Yeah, shot it up. Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, that's my Highlander idea. I'm trying to finish the whole thing. I'm excited. I'm excited for our little event. I'm gonna probably try to have you stay up late playing Magic with me next week in Philly so I can test as much as possible.
Yeah, Magic, One Piece, the TCG, and that is our Highlander Roulette Highlander Gauntlet Minute, brought to you by Ben Bateman. And
are you happy? I did good. Yeah. It was only a minute. I kept it short.
Only 1 minute. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, patrons. Thank you, everyone, for watching the show. That is it for today. If we missed a card or you think is going to be super modern playable, please comment it below. We definitely probably missed a few. If you think one of the cards we mentioned has no chance of ever seeing play and that we're crazy, also feel free to comment that below. If you think that we should do an entire episode on the One Piece TCG, also comment that below. Thank you so much to our patrons. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Make sure to check all of our sponsors out. Thank you, Channel Fireball, for hosting us. And thank you, TCG Player, for being our sponsor. And we will talk to everyone next week. And we'll thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.